Hello again to all subscribers and listeners of this channel. Today, I would like to detail what I think Toei Animation Studio should be doing with the Dragon Ball franchise instead of what they've been doing. As far as I'm concerned, they spent way too much time rehashing what seems like the same formula over and over and over again, while also watering down classic characters like Vegeta and others and turning them into a joke. Also, way overusing and way overexpanding the Super Saiyan thing. Like, it's way overdone now. So, here's what I think they should be doing instead of what they've been doing with Dragon Ball Super and all these other storylines they've come out with recently. So, let us begin. As far as I'm concerned, Toei, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but I'm going to call it Toei Animation and Akira Toriyama, the legendary Akira Toriyama. In my opinion, they need to somehow get together and create a new series that actually goes back in time and focuses almost exclusively on the origin of the Saiyans. I'll call them Tsufuru-Jins, the little short people that they got into battle with on planet Vegeta. And basically what their life was like on planet Vegeta. Basically just whatever was going on with the Saiyans before Goku and Vegeta were even born. I'd love to see a series about that. So the story can eventually lead up to when the planet was destroyed, and basically goes all the way up to right before the beginning of Dragon Ball. So far Toei Animation has been downgrading, overusing, and severely misusing, in my opinion, the characters from the original series. Dragon Ball GT was boring, and if you look closely at it, it basically was a redo of Dragon Ball in many different ways. If you pay enough attention. Resurrection F, or in the other resurrections of Frieza and old characters, old villains, was uninteresting and to me kind of silly. The animation looks cheaper in the newer films and the newer series. Everything looks a lot less fluid, and the stories just feel even more repetitive compared to the three big sagas, which in their own right were not the most complex stories, but were still very compelling compared to what's being put out now. So, now on to Dragon Ball Super. Just looks like another retelling of the Super Saiyan Rainbow being extended to the point of absurdity. And when I say Super Saiyan Rainbow, I'm talking about the way overdone Super Saiyan that's been turned into different colors, and they can gain that form with almost effortlessly without any real emotion or real tie to any real incredibly dramatic situation. They just kind of do it because they feel a certain way, which really cheapens it. But that's what they're doing now, and I'm not feeling it. The Rainbow Saiyan thing just isn't doing anything for me. And also, constantly fighting predictable antagonists over and over and over again. Everything just feels like it's being way overdone, way over cliche. Just, do something different to enhance the universe that Akira Toriyama created 30 years ago. So here's what I think. Instead of this stale nonsense, they need to go back in time and tell us the story of the Saiyans and what they did on their home planet before anything else happened. I'll break it down like this to keep it simple. The basics. Who should be the main characters in this series, in my opinion? Frieza and his multi-planetary empire of conquest, where he enslaves and trades planets and people all over the place. Of course, the Saiyans. The Tsufuru-Jins, I believe it's called, but I'm going to call them Tsufuru-Jins. They're the smaller, more multi-hair colored people that the Saiyans went to war with early on. And maybe the Namekians to a degree. And also some of the godlike beings who might oversee what's going on. They won't interact, but they will oversee what's going on with all these different characters. So they should be the main ones. What should it be? The story of where the Saiyans came from, what they did on their home planet, and how they came to work for Frieza. Also, their interaction with the Tsufuru-Jins and the plant people and Frieza himself. Where This should take place mainly on Planet Plant, or later on named Planet Vegeta, and to a much lesser extent on Frieza's spaceship. When? This should occur anywhere, or the storyline should take place anywhere from a few thousand years ago to up to just before the events of Dragon Ball. Why? This to me will be a much deeper, richer, and more interesting storyline that could lead up to who Goku and Vegeta are as characters and as Saiyan warriors. How? This story should be written as a manga, animated, and then the final story arc should be animated as a feature film, in my opinion. This will be a completely awesome backstory for the entire Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z franchise that I think a lot of people would like to see. I'm assuming I'm not the only one that's been thinking about something like this, but yes, would love to see this. And yes, a major part of this arc would be the Saiyan versus Tsufuru-Jin war. That I think would be incredibly awesome if they actually went in that direction. So here's what's going on with the story. Or rather, here's what's going on with the setting. We see the Saiyans on Planet Plant. Sorry, but I don't take the Sadala story seriously. Me personally, I don't consider that canon. That doesn't make sense to me. Planet Plant should be their original home planet that they then took over later on, before they met Frieza. That I like a lot better, and it's a lot simpler. It makes more sense, but whatever. So Planet Plant is this, in this continuity, would actually be their original home planet. It is here that we first witnessed the Saiyans thousands of years before the events of Dragon Ball. It is also here where we meet the plant people, the ones that you see in episode of Bardock, the little short ones. And we also meet the Tsufuru-Jins, what they call the Tuffles, although I don't like that name. The Tuffles sounds really stupid, but whatever. I'm going to call them either Tsufuru-Jin or the Tsufuru-Jins. The plant people, again, the same short ones that you saw from episode of Bardock, live in a much greener, mildly forested area of the planet. They live in small to medium-sized villages averaging between 100 to 1,000 inhabitants each. There are a total population of 50,000 or so throughout the entire planet. The Tsufuru-Jins or Tsufuru-Jins, they're the technologically advanced but very short people that the Saiyans fight against later on. They live in technologically advanced cities, dozens of them. But there are 3 cities that are the largest of them. And here is what they should be if the story went my way. Cherry Town will be their second largest city and has 3 million inhabitants. Berryville will have 1.5 million inhabitants. It will be their smallest of the 3 big cities. And the largest of the 3 will be called Appleton Capital City, with a population of 9 million. So again, Berryville is the smallest, then Cherrytown, then Appleton, Capital City. In that order. And yes, many things among the Tsufuru-Jins will be named after fruits, just like how many things about the Saiyans are named after vegetables. And finally, one more thing. The Tsufuru-Jin total population is about 18 million altogether, with about almost 14 million of their population living in those 3 big cities all by themselves. But yeah. So finally, going on to the Saiyans. As far as the Saiyans, they live in isolated tribes scattered all across the Badlands of Planet Plant. But the tribes themselves can be divided into 3 major regions, or 3 major groups. The first group is the Northern Saiyans. They tend to be a bit bulkier and hairier than the other 2 groups. Think of Nappa, if he had more head hair. They live far up in the northern hemisphere. They put up with more precipitation, very harsh but cold winds, and they make their dwellings in small mountains and caves in the northern plateaus, and also inside active volcanoes. They use the caves to fight and practice fighting in and around the volcanoes to harden their bodies and to make them stronger. They make themselves much more capable warriors when they train in these very harsh environments. They're also much closer to certain types of vegetation that grows at higher altitudes. The major feature of the Northern Saiyans territory is the giant caves, the plant forests, and the lava valleys that are in and around the volcanoes that they live in and around and amongst. They hunt large cattle-like creatures. They also hunt flying animals and cave-dwelling nocturnal creatures that roam in herds and live in and on the plateaus just below the lava valleys. The next group is the desert Saiyans. They tend to be a bit slimmer, taller, and have slightly more tan skin, a little bit darker, and that's because they've gotten overly used to the brighter but also hotter, more desert environment. Think of what Broly looks like when he's not in his legendary form. That's what a lot of the desert Saiyans look like. They live further out towards the west, surrounded by tornadoes and typhoons that periodically catch on fire. The desert Saiyans use the fiery typhoons and fiery tornadoes to condition their bodies for fighting. They're also more scattered into smaller tribes across the west and tend to be less hairy. The major feature of the desert Saiyans' territory is the desert itself with its sparse vegetation. It has large lakes and seas, and the seas are where a lot of the flaming tornadoes and flaming typhoons originate. They hunt, or rather the desert Saiyans hunt large whale-like creatures, some of which swim in the water while others walk on land, as well as consuming some of the plants that grow in the desert. Many species of these plants grow very large, are edible, they grow very quickly, and they produce an abundance of seeds and also produce this sap that has healing properties in the sap, and the sap tends to be kind of a greenish color. And finally, there are the mountain Saiyans. The mountain Saiyans are the ones Goku and Vegeta are descended from. And they're also the ones that are pictured in Akira Toriyama's drawing of the caves where they live. There are fewer in number than the desert or the mountain Saiyans, but they appear to be a bit stronger on average. They live closer to the east near the equator, but are not as scattered. They live in larger social groups, are located further east, like I said, than the other two, and they live in the large mountains. And they follow a much more strict hierarchy. So there are mountains in the east, but there are also smaller mountains in the north, just so you know. At least the way I would picture it. The mountain Saiyans of the east, they routinely travel south to fight and hunt, even during the flaming typhoons. The major features of the mountain Saiyans territory are the large mountains, with slightly smaller caves within them. These mountains are also surrounded by the plant life and animals, mainly cattle-like creatures, flying insects, whale-like creatures, and burrowing animals live here. All of which are eaten by the mountain Saiyans all the time. They eat everything. But yeah, the mountain Saiyans hunt them all. All Saiyans are omnivores. They can eat pretty much anything, and Saiyans have extremely high metabolisms. They burn energy very quickly, so they eat an immense amount of food when they're hungry. Planet is much larger than planet Earth. It has a much higher gravity than planet Earth. So the Saiyans have gotten used to the gravity of the planet ages ago, and they actually use it to help them train and become stronger and more capable fighters. So the planet itself is making them to be the strong warriors that they've always been. The mountain Saiyans were the ones assumed to have the bloodline somewhere among them that could lead to the Super Saiyan transformation. That's very important. Now here's the overall plot. We meet the Saiyans in the beginning hunting their prey, fighting and learning survival/warrior skills and techniques from a young age while surrounded by their peers and their family members. We see all three types of Saiyans killing their prey, getting stronger, and eventually treating what should be inhospitable climates around them as playthings. Yes, giant volcanoes, mountains, massive whale-like creatures, lava valleys, massive caves, all these things which would be almost death traps for most other species. The Saiyans reach a certain point in their maturity where they're playing with these things and they're like toys because they're immensely strong. But as time goes on, the Northern Saiyans and the Desert Saiyans become jealous of the Mountain Saiyans. The Mountain Saiyans become wary and start attacking the other two types. The Mountain Saiyans win most of the time. Not every fight, but most of the fights. This drives a wedge between them as they all vie for power and try to figure out who has the right to be the leaders of all Saiyan warriors. Pretty soon, it looks like a battle royale will break out between the elite groups of all three types of Saiyan. Just as the tension is about to reach its peak, a young Saiyan child spots a Tsufuru-Jin ship that's on a scouting mission to find plants. The young Saiyan blasts the ship and kills everyone on board. The Tsufuru-Jin army finds out what happens, and they eventually find the young Saiyan. After a brief engagement, they eventually kill the Saiyan child, but not after losing dozens of their men in the process. The Saiyan child's mother finds out, rescues his body, and brings him back to her home tribe. The mother is a desert Saiyan, but the child's father is a northern Saiyan. While both groups are discussing how they should defeat the mountain Saiyans and figure out who should be the ones at the top leading all Saiyans into battle when they go into whatever battle they go into, they both eventually discover what happened to the child and want to seek revenge against anyone who dares kill a Saiyan. So they both launch an assault on the Tsufuru-Jins. And after an initial aggressive attempt, and they kill lots of Tsufuru-Jins when they do it, the Tsufuru-Jins push back with very advanced technology and force the Saiyans back into their homelands. The Saiyans severely underestimated the Tsufuru-Jin technology and military know-how, so their loss was a bit of a surprise to them. A humiliating loss for them as a group of Saiyans to be defeated by the weaker but technologically advanced species, the Tsufuru-Jins. In their Uzaru form, though, they would have defeated the Tsufuru-Jins easily. It wouldn't have even been a fight. It would have been completely one-sided. But they weren't ready, and they didn't have the full moon at the time, so they couldn't transform. So the Mountain Saiyans find out about this later on, and once they find out about it, they begin laughing at such humiliating defeats of the other two groups by the Tsufuru-Jin technology. But the other two groups counter and say that they didn't mobilize their entire population, so it doesn't really count as a true loss. And they're sure that if they had mobilized everybody to fight together, they would have won. And they actually would have won easily. But that's not how it went out. That's not how it played out. So when the Mountain Saiyans hear this, they respond and say that they're going to go and attack the Tsufuru-Jins, and they're going to destroy everything to prove that they're better warriors than the other two, and they're going to do it to avenge the death of that young Saiyan that got killed by the Tsufuru-Jin army. So the Mountain Saiyans launch an assault on the Tsufuru-Jins. They do a much better job, but they don't completely wipe out the Tsufuru-Jin army at all. They just give the Tsufuru-Jin army a much tougher time, and eventually get pushed back also, but not as easily. So eventually, the two groups decide that there should be one last assault on the Tsufuru-Jins where they just wipe out the entire population, and whoever is able to do it first out of the three major groups, as in between the Mountain Saiyans, the Desert Saiyans, and the Northern Saiyans, whoever can wipe out the Tsufuru-Jins completely first and destroy not just their military, but their entire population, that group should be the dominant group of Saiyans, and they should lead all Saiyans into future battles, no matter what. So, they launch their next attack during the planet's full moon, and they all try to get out to the Tsufuru-Jin's three biggest cities, Appleton, capital city, Berryville, and Cherrytown. They try to get out there as quickly as possible. The Mountain Saiyans are the ones that get there first. They get there during the full moon. They transform, and they decimate everything. The Tsufuru-Jins put up as best of a fight as they can. They pull out all the stops. They pull out every single military guy. They pull out every bit of technology, every bit of weaponry. They pull out every single thing they can think of to fight the Saiyans when they're attacking in their Uzaru form, and it does nothing. The Tsufuru-Jins get crushed all the way. And through this, we get what's going on, what ultimately leads on to the next part of the series, in my opinion. Like I said, the Mountain Saiyans were the ones that got there first. They were able to transform first, and they were led by King Vegeta, who was actually much younger at the time. And because they won so easily, they ended up putting King Vegeta as king of all the Saiyans, and he pretty much promoted the people that are close to him to higher rankings of the Saiyan royalty. And after they decimate all the Tsufuru-Jins, or they think they do, we're not actually sure that they killed off all of them, but they assume that they did. They eventually take over all the cities. They learn how to use all the technology that was there. And they renamed the planet Vegeta. And the Saiyans are the sole rulers of the planet from here on out. So from here, we continue to King Vegeta ruling over the Saiyans until Frieza shows up, who later on frightens King Vegeta, convinces the Saiyans to work under him until Frieza starts getting worried about the Super Saiyan transformation that he had some type of premonition about, I guess. He then obliterates the Saiyans, and we move forward into our current story, or not current story, but the original story of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, following Goku and his friends. And that's the storyline that I would love to see. So basically, the entire storyline would be a flashback of everything that happened up to the point of the beginning of Dragon Ball. And there's actually another part that I'd like to go into later on, so I might make a part 2 of this video. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, tell me what you think and let me know if I should alter it somehow, if you have any ideas of your own for the storyline. But I might actually author a book about this exact premise pretty soon. I'm not sure. I gotta think about that. But yeah, like I said, I'm gonna make a part 2 to this where I go deeper into what's going on after the Saiyans take over planet Vegeta. And I want to break that down in the next video, so please stay tuned. Hope you enjoyed. That's all for now. Please like, subscribe, share, and donate to support this channel and its content. You have a nice day. I'm out. Peace.